Hello everyone, welcome to the webinar. What we're going to cover today is the knowledge and skills that chefs need to lead the shift to sustainable food service. Now we've actually run two webinars today, one in the afternoon for Europe and one later at night for our friends on the other side of the Atlantic. So this is the Atlantic version. So we only recorded one copy of this for obvious reasons. So welcome to the webinar. If you couldn't make it, I hope this short recording is going to be useful for you. Okay, quick introductions. My name is Will Nicholson. I'm an ex-chef and an ex-restaurant owner. And the last few years I've been working more in food sustainability. Both in a research context and working with caterers and restaurants to help them to be more sustainable in their food service. My company is called Interfood. Interfood uses research and technology to help food service businesses to serve more profitable, sustainable and healthy meals. You can find out more about us at interfood.no. What we focus on primarily is reporting capability for menus, sales and procurement, so we can show you your climate change impacts and so on over time across your business, help you to build a roadmap and help you to celebrate success. But on to the webinar. Now, I was interested in the level of understanding that people working in the industry had in key sustainability areas, for the reason that I give quite a lot of training courses to chefs and so on, and I've always found that quite an ineffective or inefficient way of helping people. So we wanted to see if there are other ways of doing this. So for example, we wanted to understand what people knew about food and climate change. Food systems are pretty big contributors to greenhouse gas emissions, and we wanted to see really whether there was sufficient knowledge in the chef world about this. Also other food-related issues such as land use change and its causes. So when natural habitats are going from this to this and to this, primarily or often to produce food for us to eat. And then more general things like soil degradation and its causes and impacts on ocean habitats and so on. And of course, food waste, which, as most of us know, food waste is a big issue. It's been something of a hot topic in the last few years, albeit a problem that I would argue we haven't quite solved yet. Now, the reason I wanted to find out more about this is all the work I've done with the research community suggests that we need to be producing better and consuming better. And the signal we're getting is that we need both and that they are codependent. And as chefs, or certainly as in the food service world, we sit more on the consumer side, but I think we also have a big influence over production by the food because of the food we buy. So if we shift in an effective way to a more sustainable system, then the impacts that we have could be going in both directions. And within catering, certainly from the projects I've done in the past, with restaurants and caterers and hotels, I think there's a number of key issues, that are key areas, if you like. Creating sustainable food concepts is obviously at the core of this, but also having chefs who are engaged, motivated and knowledgeable and not least empowered is pretty important, I think. And the ability to communicate food sustainability, partly with our guests on a day-to-day basis, but also on a wider perspective in terms of our responsibility to communicate with customers and almost a responsibility to educate people about food sustainability and to celebrate success when we're doing good things. But I think the chefs are probably the kind of the linchpin in all of this. So I wanted to find out a bit more about how we can help chefs. So earlier this year, I carried out a short survey with about 50 chefs and followed it up with more detailed interviews with 8 chefs. And I'm going to share the results with you. Just a short disclaimer, towards the end of this webinar, I'll also be just introducing an online platform that we have launched in a response to this. So we wanted to ask chefs if they had a good understanding about environmental impacts of our food systems on a general basis. And now when you run a survey, quite often, in my experience, you will get the people who are already most engaged in that topic they'll be the ones who respond. So I was kind of expecting that we would get a lot of chefs saying, yes, we have a good understanding of environmental impacts, purely because it was the chefs that had the understanding that bothered replying to the surveys. But actually what we found was the opposite, really. That very few chefs felt they had a good understanding. A lot said no, that we don't feel that we as chefs we have a good understanding. But the biggest impacts, the biggest response was that it varies, and I think that is perhaps the most interesting point here. That if we are going to have a roadmap to sustainable food service, we need consistent messaging, and we need some consistency in people's understanding. And I think we've got a job to do there to help chefs to have a better understanding. So we looked a little bit deeper at this, and we asked which topics chefs would like to have more knowledge about. And we included in this the kind of the big ticket items from an environmental perspective, if you like. Climate change, deforestation, ocean habitats, food waste, and sort of chemical use and things like that. Clearly, there's a lot of overlap in here, and there's a lot of kind of cross-cutting issues here. And it seemed that chefs felt that food waste and climate change were areas they'd like to have more knowledge, but really it was across the board, isn't it? I mean, what this really says is chefs don't really have an understanding of the big picture and how this all fits together. And we can't really expect them to apply stuff to their jobs if they don't really have that basic level of understanding. But we asked about the jobs, because that seemed to be the next level. So in which areas of work would chefs like to have more skills? And what we found was the responses were, we'd like to have more skills in creating sustainable recipes. They weren't so bothered about creating sustainable sales. I think in my experience as a chef, I think perhaps we sometimes feel that is more the job of front of house, in all contexts, not just in restaurants, but in staff buffets and hotels and so on. And interestingly, chefs would like to have more skills in reducing wastage, which I found quite interesting, because all the chefs I know, very few of us would like to admit that we've got a food waste problem. We all like to think we've got good control over our food waste, but it seems that we would like more knowledge there, or more skills in that area. Now, from my experience, all these three are pretty interrelated, actually. I mean, the projects I've done with restaurants and caterers, when you try to create more sustainable recipes, you've also got to include in that package, how are you going to deal with sales? How are you going to focus on sustainable sales? And how are you going to manage your production levels to reduce your wastage and so forth? So to summarise, the results from the survey to me are pretty clear. That it was a small survey group, but it seems really clear to me that chefs don't have the opportunity to learn the things that they need to learn when it comes to sustainable food service, and they're pretty much across the board, and it covers an awful lot of the different areas of their jobs. It's not like there's one area where they just don't have the skills. They seem to have a pretty wide need and desire to have better opportunities to learn about this. So then we covered a little bit more detail with some interviews. And I kept the interviews pretty open, because I didn't want to lead people into certain answers inadvertently. 3 main themes came out of the interviews. Chefs all seemed to say that they wanted accessible and flexible learning, that they didn't necessarily want to take half a day in a training room being told about food sustainability. They wanted it to be something that they could do a little bit more flexibly. And as an ex-chef, I would agree with that. I think that would be my preferred way of learning as well. And there was, if you excuse the phrase, there was a consistent message that the messaging they got was inconsistent. And what I mean by that is, around a lot of the sustainability areas, they felt that the messaging they got was quite confusing. A couple of examples that were thrown up were around local food, in what way is local food really good for the environment and what way is it not so important. The same with organic. I won't go into it in great detail, but some chefs were adamant that organic was a waste of time, and other chefs seemed adamant that organic was going to save the world. And of course, what research is really saying is that it's more nuanced than that. Now, if the chefs have this kind of inconsistent understanding, then we're not helping them to do their jobs. So I think that's quite an important message in there. And really importantly, there was a lot of emphasis on chefs feeling that it wasn't just down to them, that they felt that there needed to be more knowledge across the business, if you like. So higher up in the industry, in the business, people who controlled food, who had more decision-making influence over recipes and menu plans and so on, should be more engaged with the sustainability side of it, so that chefs were empowered to deliver. And then, as I mentioned before, the front of house thing, that they felt there was a need for the front of house to be a little bit more educated or a little bit more engaged in this. So that's what we learned. Now, what I wanted to do with that was test out some ideas of how we can help fix this. So we created an online course and a pilot course, and we tested it with some chefs in November. The course was called How to Create and Sell Menu Plans that Are Sustainable and Profitable. And we tested it in partnership with the Chefs Forum in the UK, back in England, and got feedback from chefs and made changes where relevant. And we took the good stuff and threw out the stuff they didn't like or they found didn't help them. And I just want to share with you some of the good and some of the bad. This screen is only the good, by the way. I didn't ask them to write down the bad bits, I just took notes. So what we found generally was that chefs, they liked the fact that there was research-based facts and figures in the training that we gave them, and that it was related to their jobs and gave them insights and in the things they can do in their jobs. And there was a theme, certainly from, for example, from Mark here, that he felt this was something that should be available for everyone, from the junior chefs all the way up to more experienced chefs. So there was a lot of positive feedback from them. We also got some feedback that they felt that it should be applicable to outside of the chef world. It should be people front of house, people higher up in the industry should be going through these kind of online learning opportunities as well. So that's something that we've taken on board, that we need to not just focus on the chefs. But off the back of this, we saw a need, so we thought we would try and meet that need. So we created 2 online courses written by chefs for chefs. So what we've done is taken all the projects that I've done in the past that have been successful, the bits that have really worked, and then the feedback and the input we've had from chefs over this period of time. With the survey, with the interviews, and with the pilot, we put all of that together into 2 courses. One geared at everyone who's working in the chef world. So we've called that food and environment essentials. And what we want there is to give kitchen staff a really good grounding in the key environmental areas. So we're covering climate change, land use change, biodiversity, impacts on the oceans, food waste, and so forth, and applying that to what it means in our daily jobs, menus, sales, and waste, and these areas. And then for people who are more decision-making in food service, we've basically improved on the pilot course how to create and sell menu plans that are sustainable and profitable. And this is obviously more for development chefs, head chefs, senior chefs, kitchen managers, and so on, covering the essentials, plus how to create more sustainable menu plans, how to sell more sustainable menu plans, giving them a roadmap, a methodology, and step-by-step processes that we've been through that have worked, and they can now take on board. In terms of delivery, the key feedback we had was flexibility and things like that. So what we've done is we've made them online, suitable for all devices, and flexible approaches. So short 5-minute instructional videos with learning exercise in between, and the ability to do it as a group-based learning program for both courses. And we feel we've priced it in a very accessible way. We want this to be accessible for chefs. We want them to try it, we want them to use it, we want them to learn from it, and we want them to give us feedback so we can keep improving this. To launch it, we're putting out a 30% discount on all these courses before the 15th of January. So what we want to do is get as many people engaged as possible, and we want feedback from people so that we can keep improving it. So if you do want to have a look at the courses, they're hosted on our school called the School of Sustainable Food Service. It's skillsthatsavetheworld.teachable.com, and you can literally go on there, choose a course, sign up and take the course. If you, for example, have got teams and want to do some group-based learning on this, or you just want to ask some questions about it, if you go to interfood.no/courses, or you can email me directly at will@interlife.no. So please get in touch if you've got any questions. We hope that this could be part of a transition that we need to really push the industry faster in the right direction. Thanks ever so much for listening. It's getting a bit late now in Europe, so I'm going to clock off, and I hope you have a great rest of the day.